It was July 30th, 1968, and Chris barely made it in time. The guy who'd driven him the last 70 miles had been kind enough to drop him off close to his destination. At least he told Chris he thought it was somewhere around here. Taking his bag and guitar from the back of an old Ford pickup, Chris said, "Thanks again, Ray. You sure don't want to stay for the concert. This will go down in history." "No, I need to get further down the road. You're one of those people who go back in time, Chris. Not many roam the roads anymore. Be careful." "I'll try, Ray. Thanks again for the ride." Not knowing Baton Rouge, the first step was to get directions. He didn't expect Baton Rouge to be so big. Big cities usually meant a lot of walking and difficulty hitchhiking. Seeing a gas station just half a block away in what seemed like the right direction, Chris slung the bag over his shoulder, grabbed the handle of his guitar case, and walked on. "Hey, can you tell me how to get to Lakeshore Auditorium?" Chris asked the young man behind the cash register. "Sure. Are you going to the concert tonight?" "I hope so. I need to find a place where I can make some money playing on the street. I think tickets are $6. Are you going tonight?" "Damn sure. I won't miss this. You're not that far anyway. You came here on Highway 190, just keep heading west toward downtown. In a couple of miles, you'll reach River Road. Turn north, and you can't miss it. If you go past the state capitol, you've gone too far. But damn, it's a huge building, and I imagine there'll be a crowd there already," said the young red-haired gas station attendant. "Thanks a lot, maybe I'll see you later," Chris said and continued on his way. Indeed, the walk took no more than half an hour, and he hoped that he would have time to earn enough money for a ticket. He already had $6, and he definitely wasn't going to miss the opening of Jimi Hendrix's second tour. Not planning to stay in Baton Rouge for more than one night, he hoped to replenish his cash reserves a little, and the crowd was always a good place to do that. Walking into the action, he saw that there were already a decent number of students and slackers like him hanging out around the auditorium, so Chris sat down by the large fountain and took his six-string Guild guitar out of its battered case. This old guitar, and it had seen plenty of good times and more than their fair share of bad. It was worn and scratched, as if it had been used for a very long time, just like him. But most importantly, like all good friends, they knew each other intimately and shared tears and laughter in bars and taverns, on railroads and highways. This old friend paid for many of his meals. Now they just needed to buy a ticket together. Chris started with an old Hank Williams song, just to stretch his arms. He then played a couple of country songs that everyone should know. The crowd began to listen, and some even joined in, as coins began to jingle in the guitar case where the guitar had recently been. Just as things started to come together, he saw her looking at him. A less experienced performer would have gone astray at this point. He saw her smile, addressed only to him, and very sweet, a pretty young girl with a flower in her hair. At the end of the song, she boldly said, "You're playing well, but we could do it better together." "Oh, I wouldn't argue with that. What are you suggesting?" "You play and sing, I dance and attract a crowd, and then we split the earnings in half." Chris was impressed. First, he was struck by her self-confidence. Secondly, he was very impressed by the fact how good she looked in a tight top that was no doubt designed with the express purpose of driving the male sex crazy. A beautiful design, but it had an even better body. It was a tease, and he was more than willing to be teased. His eyes lingered long enough to appreciate the high rise of her breasts, which the thin cotton material did not hide at all. What impressed him most was the long black curls and deep dark brown eyes. His first thought was the gypsies. His second was desire. "So, are you going to stare at me until the crowd disperses, or are we going to make money?" "I'm in, but I'll leave what's already in the case," he replied, scooping up the scattered coins into his hand and tucking them into his trouser pocket. "Okay, play something lively so I can dance," the stranger said and twirled, her long cotton skirt flying out like an opening floral umbrella. Chris started strumming beat music, playing simply and not humming. He was curious about this strange woman who had just appeared out of nowhere and burst into his quiet life. But he soon saw that she was right. The crowd grew, and the tips piled up faster than he had ever done alone. The rhythms he played were so familiar that he, too, could focus on the dancer and appreciate the grace of this strange woman. Her dancing was a unique combination of subtle nuance and a primal urgency that spoke of life itself, all coated with a sensual allure of sexuality that sparkled over the entire crowd. As the drummer joined them, Chris looked back and saw a black man with long hair and unusual clothes, beating out the rhythm perfectly. They exchanged greetings, and the drummer joined in with great enthusiasm. Looking back at the strange woman, it was obvious that she was literally pouring out her soul in front of the crowd. She was absorbed in her dance, and he was absorbed in her. Out of curiosity, Chris slowly and smoothly lowered the tempo until all three performers were engaged in a slow, seductive expression of music and dance. She was the epitome of female sexuality as her lithe body perfectly interpreted his eloquent expressions of notes and rhythm. There were others dancing now, mostly other young hippie girls with a few brave young men trying to keep up. What started out as a way to earn a couple of tickets has turned into a mini-event in itself. The crowd was carefree and happy, and the performance of these three strangers will no doubt become part of anyone's memory of the night they saw Jimi Hendrix live. Even without counting, Chris knew they had more than enough to buy a couple of tickets. He kept an eye on the guitar case and the money in it, but it wasn't a crowd to worry about, and they were caught up in the movement of the moment. It was a time of hope, even in the face of evil, a time of love, even in the face of so much hate. It's also almost time to wrap up this show and buy tickets. Chris caught the unfamiliar girl's gaze and signaled to finish. He and the drummer then made contact, and everyone ended together with a quick, dramatic finale. The girl followed the accompaniment flawlessly, making a couple of last pirouettes and sinking to the ground for the last blow, her head lowered, thick black curls covering her face, and her arms extended to the ground. The crowd cheered and clapped, and coins jingled into the case. After a few kind words of thanks to the performers, the crowd slowly moved towards the audience for the real show. "I told you so," she said with confidence. "You were right. I think they liked your little addition to the music," Chris replied, testing the waters a bit. "I would say it's the other way around," the black-haired beauty retorted. "She had character. You have to give her credit." "No joke. You were amazing. You had professional dance training, didn't you?" "Yes, the usual story of a mother who wants to make her daughter a ballerina. But it gave me some basic skills," she answered, a little more openly. "Let's split the tip with our newest member of the group and buy some tickets before it's too late. By the way, my name is Chris," he said, and extended his hand. "My friends call me Bobby," she replied, tenderly accepting the extended hand of friendship. "Are you local, Bobby?" "No, I'm just passing by. And you?" "Same thing. I got into town about an hour ago. I'll probably leave at first light," Chris said. "I probably won't stay here long either. There's a lot of negative energy, a lot of hatred. I feel it in my bones. I'm not used to all this segregation," Bobby replied. "I feel it too. Old habits die hard. But let's go listen to Jimmy break down some of these walls with his music." The concert was staged at Independence Hall, which was undoubtedly a piece of local history. Like many music halls built in the first half of the century in the South, this hall held memories of many legends of the past. If old walls could talk, they would tell incredible stories. Unlike many concerts and music festivals held in large stadiums across the country, there was actually seating for everyone. Chris put his bag between his legs and Bobby held the guitar for him. While they waited for the first group to leave, they chatted and got to know each other better. "So where are you going after all this?" Bobby asked. "Basically, to the west," he replied. "That doesn't sound like a plan. Is there a specific location?" "Not really. I'll probably be in Austin for a few days, and I know a few people who are somewhere in the Taos area that I'm hoping to find. What about you?" "Well, I stayed with friends for a week, but my big plan is to get to San Francisco. I have one friend there, and according to her last letter, this is the best place now," Bobby said. "Looks like we're heading in the same direction. Do you have a car or something?" No, I'm just going to hitch rides and hope for the best, Bobby replied. I usually try to jump on an empty boxcar. Once you get on, you usually have a good distance to ride before you have to jump off. Have you ever ridden trains? No, the thought hasn't occurred to me, but it sounds like an adventure I shouldn't miss. I always thought it was quite dangerous. Have you ever been bothered? Not even worth mentioning. I'm not sure I'd recommend it to a young lady, especially on her own. But it does give a different view of the country, generally more picturesque if you like nature. I enjoy meeting people on these roads. It's a completely different culture. One that is hidden from most people, Chris said. Where are you going to sleep tonight? Bobby asked. To be honest, I haven't planned that far yet. I think I might try to find a room somewhere since we made so much money today. I'll figure it out after the show. You can stay at the place where I live now if you want. There are always people coming and going, so another one won't bother anyone, Bobby suggested. Thanks for the offer. I'll take it if you're sure it'll be okay, Chris said. No problem, like I said, this place is open to everyone, she replied. What she didn't tell him was that she was interested in more than just offering the stranger a place to stay. She was attracted to his rugged masculinity from the very first moment she laid eyes on him. Many of the guys who hung out with the people she met here were college students and still very insecure. She tried several of them in bed and found it fun, but not something she couldn't understand. Maybe it was the energy of the evening, but the big hands that so delicately created the music raised questions. She was definitely ready for a real man, and Chris was a man in every sense of the word, not least because he seemed to be a gentleman, despite his rugged appearance. Yes, she definitely wanted to see more of what was hidden under that shell. Finally, the host took the stage and shouted into the microphone, "Baton Rouge, are you ready?" It was a stupid question, but the concert had to start somewhere. The crowd of several thousand roared in response, and the guy on stage announced the exit band, Soft Machine, to warm up the crowd. As expected, the band started at full volume, and the crowd added their own thunder to the moment. It was a statement of a new generation throwing off the soft restrictions of the past. The band did a good job warming up the crowd and getting them ready for the main event. Everyone seemed to be on their feet, including Chris and Bobby. Being over 6 feet tall, he had the advantage of seeing what was happening on stage. Bobby used this distraction to further explore the subtleties of his features. The music and the closeness of this man were definitely stirring in her mind. The scent of these thoughts was that growing desire that she had not satisfied for some time. Although Chris did look at the rockers on stage, it didn't take up his full attention to see what needed to be seen. He had already seen dozens of similar groups in his travels. He could also see Bobby out of the corner of his eye and could feel her searching gaze, as if she were appraising a horse at an auction. She amused and intrigued him, and he would definitely want to take her to bed. He liked her courage and the fact that she was completely alone in this lifestyle. The fact that he found her beautiful was just the cherry on top of an already perfect cake. He was a little annoyed that she couldn't see the stage because of the big guy in front of her. Noticing that he himself was standing behind this guy's girlfriend, Chris hugged Bobby and invited her to stand in front of him. Once she was settled into her new seat, Chris moved his bag from the floor to her remaining seat. Now they could both see, and he had good reason to keep her close to him. The fact that she didn't resist told him a lot. As Soft Machine finished what would become one of the highlights of their own careers, the crowd was ready to sit back down. When the last song died down and the band left the stage, Bobby and Chris were ready to take a break as well. Instead of moving his bag and guitar, Chris simply sat down, pulling Bobby into his lap. She seemed to him a small, but clearly an adult woman. He had no doubt that she was a fiery girl when angered, but he had always liked strong women. His mother was such a woman, and she taught him how to treat women and how to evaluate them. A smile lit up his face as he wondered what his mom would think of Bobby. He guessed she would really like her. "What do you think of the group?" she asked when the noise died down to the level of conversation. "They did a good job. I liked their set. Nothing groundbreaking, but they opened for Jimi Hendrix. So it's definitely not an amateur night in Baton Rouge. Did you like it? I liked your analysis. It matches mine. Didn't you think the equipment was a little strange? Yeah, they obviously had problems. It's a shame. I hope it doesn't ruin Jimmy's performance, Chris replied. Yeah, that would be a shame. But if that's the case, maybe we'll meet him in California someday, she said. It would be really cool. I think we'd get a completely different vibe if we were there tonight. When are you going to go there? He said nothing about the fact that she subconsciously included him in her plans for California. It both puzzled and pleased him, and he wondered if she had done it on purpose to gauge his reaction. I am free and not bound by anything. I could pack my things and leave tomorrow if I wanted, but I don't see any point in staying here any longer, she replied. Well, I'm going to leave early in the morning. You can come with me if you're ready to leave this place, he said, just to suggest the idea. That's a pretty tempting offer, Chris. But how can I trust a stranger? What if you're a serial killer? She said with a laugh. The thing is, serial killers tend to be very skilled at their hobby. A good serial killer will send you to heaven so quickly that you won't even notice you left home until you see the pearly gates, he replied. Well, if you say so, maybe it's not that risky. I'll think about it, she said. We have all night to think, he replied. But if we're going to travel together and want to jump on a train, the night will be short because it's best to get to the train station before dawn and get settled. By the way, do you know where the main train junction is? Damn it, you're not kidding me, Chris. I try not to joke. I've learned that it's easier to be myself, he said with a twinkle in his blue eyes. The main station is north of here, a few more miles, right on the river. Are you really serious? About trains? Of course, a lot of people travel by rail. There are some unofficial rules to know, but mostly I like it. If you come early in the morning when the trains are lined up, they usually show you which train is right for you. It's more relaxed than you can get. Imagine, he told her. Listening to him, Bobby experienced feelings and had thoughts that she never had with other guys. She wondered if this was what they called a hobby. She had read about it in novels many times, but had never known it in practice. Who and what kind of strange man came into her life, playing the guitar and smiling as if he owned the world? She had men before him, but he gave her some new feeling. Honestly, she wanted him to have sex with her like no one had ever done. Her thoughts were interrupted by movement in the crowd. Looking at the stage, she saw several men working on amplifiers and running wires across the stage. Her thoughts and conversation with Chris had diverted all her attention, but now she could see a certain uneasiness in the crowd. Chris summed it up by saying, "They're having problems with the equipment. I'm afraid we might not get Jimmy's best performance tonight. Maybe next time in California, eh?" Well, that's a bummer, Bobby said. I disagree. If it makes you leave this place and go west, I would say that this is a blessing sent especially for me, Chris said softly into the ear of the angel sitting on his lap. Bobby turned her head to say something, and they met like old friends. They kissed. She felt small and protected in his arms as thousands of people moved around them and sounds of static and confusion came from the stage. None of this mattered to Chris and Bobby. Chris took responsibility for it, saying, "I'm sorry if I surprised you, but I'd be lying if I said I regretted it. You're the most beautiful thing I've seen in a long time. I'm sorry if I overstepped the mark." "Don't be stupid. I've been waiting for this all evening," Bobby replied with a happy tone in her voice. In that case, he lifted her chin with one finger and watched as she closed her eyes, giving in again. It was a stark reminder of where they were when the presenter's microphone screamed deafeningly. "Well, guys, as you can see, we have a little problem with the equipment. I was told that everything has been sorted out, and Jimmy and his team are already coming out with a promise to make the wait worthwhile. So let's see the Jimi Hendrix experience." The crowd was on their feet again, screaming, and Chris said into Bobby's ear, "We'll continue after the show, I hope." Bobby simply smiled and nodded in agreement as she slipped out of his arms and stood up. They joined in the applause as Jimmy and his band took the stage. Chris saw Jimmy a couple of times in New York, but it was in clubs. Tonight, the tall, slender musician appeared in black, with his signature Afro hairstyle. The music was classic Hendrix. But unlike his club performances, he showed off his guitar skills with intense physicality, even doing the splits to emphasize the soulfulness of his music. The full power of the amplifiers really highlighted his virtuosic abilities. The man was a true gift to humanity, according to Chris. Only another guitarist could fully appreciate what he did there on stage, but any rock fan knew it was unique. Chris could tell by his trained ear that the technicians had not solved all the problems with the equipment. He felt the artists' frustration as they struggled to cope with the noise and fade-outs. But the crowd seemed mostly unmoved and were happy and loud as the trio played their set. Despite his obvious displeasure with the faulty stage equipment, Jimmy complained after every song and even asked the eager audience, "How can you stand all this noise?" But his enthusiastic audience responded with applause and encouraged him to continue. Overall, the trio did the best they could under the circumstances. Chris felt their pain and knew how angry they were about their failure on the first night of the tour. Ultimately, it completely satisfied the crowd of young fans that had gathered, and that in itself validated the talent on stage that night, despite the bad luck on the tour's opening day. With the last song played, the trio left the stage, and Chris and Bobby joined the crowd, which, like ants along the lines, headed out of the building. The night air was fresh but humid. "It smells like rain," Bobby said. Chris sniffed the humid air coming off the Gulf of Mexico and nodded in agreement with her prediction. "Do you want to get something to eat or just go to your place?" "Let's just go home. I can cook something there, and we need to talk." "It's not far. We can walk," she said, and took his hand. She led them down a side street, and soon they found themselves in the old part of the city, typical of southern cities. They walked past old and once proud mansions built in some long-gone era by prominent families of the time. They were now divided into tiny apartments filled with students and working families. Small saplings planted decades ago now towered over the area like an ancient forest in a world of ghosts, past joys, and forgotten atrocities. The old houses still retained their grandeur from a distance, but up close the wrinkles of time were deeply hewn into their once proud facades. Anyone who knew them also knew that they were usually infested with pests and corroded by years of neglect. But even though they had earned their final rest, the old structures still served the people, sheltering them from the rain and the darkness of the night. It was to one of these silent monuments that Bobby led them. Chris was many things, but he was not picky. Any roof was better than no roof on a rainy night. This suggested that the morning departure might be marred by rain. It might rain, but if not, it wouldn't be the first wet day of his life. His only new concern was Bobby. "It looks like the others are still hanging out. I was with them earlier, but I lost track of them when we performed before the show. I don't know what party they're at now," she said. Looking into the old refrigerator, she announced, "There are eggs and bacon. How do you like that?" "That's great," Chris replied. They chatted, making small talk as she quickly prepared a light dinner. Then, sitting at the kitchen table, they quickly finished their meal, feeling better after the reinforcement. Chris washed the dishes while Bobby tidied up the kitchen. "We probably need to talk, Bobby. But first, I really need your shower, if that's okay," Chris said. "Let's go upstairs to the room I'm staying in. I don't want to interrupt my neighbor's party when they get home, and there's a bathroom there," Bobby replied. Gathering his things, he followed her upstairs. He fully appreciated the grace of her slender figure as she walked up the steps in front of him. She was still a mystery to him, open and closed at the same time, careless and cautious. The fact that it was all wrapped up in such unique beauty made it impossible not to fall under its spell. They needed to talk more. He needed to be sure before he took her with him. The room was everything you'd expect. High ceilings, faded paint, scratched wood floors, and a large window that revealed the darkness of a cloudy night. There was little furniture, and there was a double mattress on the floor. "It's a lot better than sleeping in the rain. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you let me stay here tonight," Chris said. "My pleasure." I look forward to learning more about you and your plans. But first, let's take a shower before the others get home. That night, they made love. Now she knew for sure that there was a big difference between men, and she had finally found one. The thought of him leaving in the morning was too much to think about at the moment. Should we discuss tomorrow? Are you still interested? Yes, I'm very interested. I want to go. I don't have much to pack, and there's nothing here to hold me back, she replied. Do you have any durable clothes suitable for the road? We could delay leaving for a couple of days, but I'd rather leave in the morning if we can, Chris said. Yes, I have heavy clothes that I didn't wear here. I have hiking boots and a backpack that I use when I hitchhike, she answered. There's probably some kind of rain shower, I guess. Yes, just a raincoat, she replied. That's good. We can buy whatever else you need along the way. Are you ready for the morning train journey? Wow, he's really serious, she thought. Now she really had to answer definitively. It didn't take her long to weigh the pros and cons of his proposal. Going out west was a motivator to leave home and hit the road, and Baton Rouge was getting boring. Chris offered her help and security to make her dream come true. Even without the new possibilities offered by her attraction to him, it was only logical to team up with him and go. Add in all these other possibilities, and it seemed stupid to say no. Chris, I don't see any reason to stay here and many reasons to go with you. So yeah, let's go. I thought you were ready to give up. I can't tell you how glad I am that you're going. One of the difficulties on a trip like mine is loneliness. I want you to know that you can count on me. I won't leave you somewhere at the mercy of fate. I promise this to you right now. Thank you for letting me join, Chris. I don't want to jinx it, but I really feel something special between us. I've never known anyone like you, Bobby said. Honesty won't put us under the evil eye, darling, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the same way about you, Chris replied. You said you wanted to leave early. How early do you think? From what you said, we're close to the train junction, so if we get there around 5 in the morning, that'll be fine. You'll need to wear dark, warm clothes. The key is to blend into the shadows in the station. Usually only the guard will pay attention. Us attention, so we just need to not give him an easy opportunity to notice us. I'll go first and see which trains are going west, then we'll need to find an empty car and stay there, he said. Then I should pack my things tonight, Bobby said. The reality of this actually happening was a bit of a shock, but she was prepared for it. That's exactly what I was hinting at. Is there anything I can do to help? No, I really don't have much. I'll leave what I can't take with me, she said. Bobby stood up and turned on a small lamp for better illumination. Chris sat cross-legged on the mattress and watched the woman who had literally burst into his life and was now scurrying around the room. Chris realized that she was one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen. This, combined with her talent and personality, led him to think about a possible settlement somewhere in the West. Bobby wasn't exaggerating. She packed her things and was ready in half an hour. It seemed like this was really happening, and Chris felt an extraordinary lightness in his soul. It seemed to him that something important and good was happening. I'll be right back. I need to grab a few things from the bathroom. I should probably grab a roll of toilet paper, right? That's a good idea. Hurry up, Chris said. When everything was packed and ready to go, she asked, So we're a couple now? Seems like it. How do you feel about it? I feel good. How do you feel about this? She asked. Instead of answering, he kissed her. She didn't want to say the word love for fear of ruining everything. It seemed to her that this was love, but she had never loved a man. It was different, but it's better to just wait and see. Finally, this day and this night are truly over. They went from strangers to lovers in one long evening. Tomorrow they left together and both silently hoped for many things. Camaraderie and happiness beckoned, and perhaps a long journey filled with many such nights awaited them. Chris woke up a little before 5 in the morning. He was used to it, and old habits were hard to break, although the soft warmth lying next to him this morning made it that much harder. But he knew they would regret it if they didn't get up on time. He quietly got out of bed and walked as silently as possible to his bag. Taking out a small bag of toiletries, he left the room to go to the bathroom. Bobby stirred and reached out to feel again the warm body that had somehow eluded her during the night. Not finding him, she opened her eyes and saw that he was gone. For a moment, it seemed to her that he had decided to leave without her, and she felt a rush of panic that erased the last traces of sleepiness. As soon as she rose from their bed, Chris quietly returned to the room. Seeing her silhouette in the light from the window, he said, "Sorry, I was trying to be quiet. It's almost time to get up." "It's time for us to get ready. Do you have anything in the kitchen that we can take with us?" Chris asked. This question brought Bobby back from her daydream, and she realized that she also needed to leave a note for her housemates so they wouldn't panic. Thinking of something edible, she said, "I know there's some peanut butter and bread. Maybe there's some cereal we can eat in the morning. We better get moving, yeah." "Perhaps," he replied. Chris got dressed while Bobby did her morning toilette. By the time she returned, he was dressed, everything packed and ready to go. He gathered her things and placed them next to his, then watched as she finished getting dressed. They ate some granola, then made some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for later. Chris filled his army canteen with fresh water and placed it in the top of the bag. Bobby left a note on the kitchen table, and they walked out the door to start a new life for both of them. It felt weird to him to have someone close to him like that, but it was a good weird feeling. They walked along empty streets. Dawn had not yet come. The only sounds are their soft footsteps and the occasional bark of dogs signaling their passage. Back on the main road leading to the train tracks, they saw a little more traffic. Chris was sorry that the weather was so gloomy for her first day on the road, but at least it hadn't started to rain yet. This also made him reconsider his plan to jump on the train. If they were stuck in an open carriage, it could be a very unpleasant day. Empty boxcars are not always easy to find. Deciding that hitchhiking might be the best option, he said, "You know, with this weather, I think we should reconsider the train plan and try to hail a car. What do you think? Not much traffic, but we can try. Why don't I take over hitchhiking? I hate to say it, but girls get rides easier than guys," she replied. "Sounds good. Let's go to the other side of the road and try to catch a ride south. Looks like more cars are heading that way." Crossing the highway was more of a leisurely stroll given the light amount of traffic, and they continued to move slowly north toward the trains, just in case. But Bobby was definitely right about the difference between men and women voting on the road. The first truck that passed by slowed down and stopped to give them a lift. He stopped not far from them, and they ran to catch up with him. Chris helped Bobby up, and when she opened the door, the driver said, "I'm heading to New Orleans. You can come with me." "Thanks for the ride. I'm Bobby, and this is my husband, Chris. We're heading west, and New Orleans would be a good start," Bobby said with a friendly smile and a little exaggeration. "Well, sit down. Throw your things on the bed in the back." As they climbed inside and Bobby settled into Chris's lap in the passenger seat, the driver pulled back onto the highway and began to accelerate. As soon as they started moving, he turned on the windshield wipers as the promised rain finally began. It could have been an accident or luck, but young lovers tend to consider it a miracle and a blessing, and that's what Chris and Bobby each thought to themselves. "What takes you west?" asked the driver, as if making small talk. Since Bobby was more outgoing, Chris let her do most of the talking, and she responded, "Oh, we're artists, and there's just more opportunity out west. We'll probably spend a couple of days in New Orleans while we're going there. We'll definitely stop by in Austin to see old friends, but the final destination is San Francisco." "Well, you're probably right about the opportunities, Bobby. You're not the first young people I've picked up heading there. I've been to every corner of this country, and I can tell you that you've made a good choice. If you like beautiful nature, have you ever been there?" "Chris, this is the first time for me," Bobby answered. "What kind of music do you play?" "It's mostly folk with a lot of Southern country influences. Chris can play just about anything, but that's what we do best. I'm more of a dancer, but we can sing a couple of songs together," Bobby said with a slight exaggeration. Well, give me a sample. By the way, my name is Walt. Chris came to Bobby's aid. She had exaggerated a little, and now they had to prove her words. Well, it's not very convenient to take out a guitar in a cramped place. I'll play the harmonica and Bobby will sing. Taking his old harmonica out of his dirty red bandana, he played softly while Bobby sang the blues. The windshield wipers clapped to the beat and Bobby clapped her hands to keep up the rhythm, while the driver sang along to familiar songs. It was a happy trio, moving south, fighting their way through the rain, which was now falling harder. This driver took them all the way to New Orleans and even went out of his way to drop them off in the city. They could have gone west from Baton Rouge, but it was a ride they got, and they were in no hurry to get anywhere. Bobby had never been to New Orleans, and they planned to spend a few days there, looking around, until their dreams took them further. It was a great way to start their journey together, a journey they both hoped would be long and filled with many nights like this. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to